name is Allison Hewitt. I am the Senior Fellow in Social Innovation here at the MaRS Discovery District, and it's my pleasure to introduce Ilse Treurnicht tonight. So as you all know, Ilse has been the CEO of MaRS since about 2005, and she has seen incredible growth in the 9 years since she's been here. So I was thinking, what does it take to be the CEO of a place like MaRS? Well, it helps if you've got experience in the world of venture capital. Check. Prior to MaRS, Ilse was the president and CEO of Primaxis Technology Ventures, a startup venture capital fund focused on the advanced technology sector. She's also been an entrepreneur, which we absolutely value around here, with senior management roles in a number of emerging technology companies. So you can see the link there. She understands the worlds of finance and technology. It also helps if you're very smart and have an advanced degree from one of the world's greatest academic institutions to prove it. Check. Ilse holds a doctorate of philosophy in chemistry from Oxford University, which she attended as a Rhodes Scholar. Chemistry, putting things together in new ways and seeing what emerges. That also sounds relevant. But where do you get this passion about the future to not only care about it, but to actively work to create it in a way that leads to the kind of jobs that we need and the kind of country we want? Well, that's another check, as it helps if you're the mother of 4 and the proud mummy of a very busy border collie named Oscar. And what about this passion for Canada? Well, many of us can relate to that. That comes from being an immigrant. Being from South Africa, where she was active in anti-apartheid work, she chose Canada as her home and the place to raise her family. When you came to MaRS tonight, you probably passed our sparkly new Phase 2 building. This means if you're the CEO of MaRS, you also have to be a real estate guru. Okay, there's no check for that one because nothing could prepare you for being a real estate guru in a world like MaRS because it's pretty complicated. But finally, to be the CEO of MaRS, you do so because one of your great mentors asked you to. You take on this crazy job because the incredible Dr. John Evans, co-founder of MaRS, believes in you, and you are determined to make this place great because you will not let him down. Mrs. Evans and Jill, on behalf of everyone who's benefited from MaRS, please thank Dr. Evans for talking Ilse into taking on this challenge. We absolutely owe him one. Ladies and gentlemen, Ilse Treurnicht.
Thank you, Allison. That's a very generous and silly introduction. But thank you for everything that you do and your colleagues at SIG to bring social innovation to life here at MaRS and in our community. And also thanks very much to our SIG national colleagues for inviting me here today. This is part of a series on social innovation, and it has brought some extraordinary leaders in the social innovation space globally to MaRS. And so I feel like an imposter standing here tonight in that crowd, but also a little intimidated because there are so many amazing people here working at that coalface of our hard challenges in the audience tonight. So I hope you will allow me to give you some thoughts on just some of the things we're thinking about in terms of changes happening in the innovation space, in this blended world of public and private sector innovation, and finally, trying to bring this into the context of what's happening at MaRS today and hopefully positioning MaRS for success in the future, because this is an important project, an important experiment, and because of Dr. Evans, it can't fail. So let's start with this question of why are we still talking about innovation? It seems like it's one of those topics that we cannot exhaust. And I think the reason is quite simple. There's a general recognition that at the heart of it, MaRS is, innovation is about human progress. It is about how we get better at doing important things. And in getting better at doing important things, we create more options for our children and grandchildren and the next generations. It's kind of the human imperative. And we're all here because we care about the future of Canada and because we recognize that innovation will actually be pretty important in the quality of that future. But innovation matters for two very specific reasons as well, and those reasons are highly relevant to what happens here at MaRS. And the first reason is that there's a very strong link between innovation and entrepreneurship. And we know that in today's modern economies, young, high-growth firms create the majority of new jobs. In Canada, the data is a little bit distorted because of our heavy reliance on the resource economy. But certainly if you look in Ontario, that's the truth. And so we have to do what we do quite well in Canada, is start a lot of companies. But starting companies, although important, is not sufficient. We need to make sure that more of them are started with stronger roots, and we have to build them better so they can become globally relevant, high-growth firms that will be the job engines of the future. And those job engines are particularly important because they not only create more jobs than any other part of the economy, as we're coming out of an economic recession, they create them faster, and they employ more young people. So this part of our economy absolutely has to thrive. And there's a second reason, and this is a very important part of the work here and particularly relevant to social innovation. And that is that innovation is humanity's toolbox, and in fact, it's humanity's only toolbox for tackling wicked problems, the kind of problems none of us can tackle on our own. And we have a few of those on our plate. So right now, and in the years to come, the really important work of innovation will be done by us as Canadians and as global citizens, turning the innovation process around. Rather than taking great ideas or great startups and pushing them towards the market, it will be done when we put those big, hairy, complex problems on the table and begin to think, how are we going to work together to solve these? Climate change, child poverty, global health, the future of capitalism. Because there are a few things we've learned in the recent economic mess. The world is much more interconnected than we could ever have imagined. And secondly, our institutions are struggling to deal with these challenges and these 21st century realities. So business as usual is not going to position us for success. Neither will doing more with less, which seems to be the primary response of our institutions today. We need to do more, but we need to do it differently. We simply have to innovate. And we're in this together. Because much as we wish otherwise, and I think as we look at these complex challenges, we grasp for the simple solutions, the shortcuts. But none of these problems will be solved by a brilliant scientist here at the MaRS Center, or a visionary entrepreneur, or a charismatic politician, or a generous philanthropist. There are no shortcuts or magic bullets. These solutions will require new coalitions of problem solvers from science, from business, from the community, from government, from across this country and beyond, to coalesce around a shared vision and work together towards solutions that are both relevant for Canada and for the world. And when we look around us, the world really needs this kind of innovation. And my own view is that Canada has something unique to contribute to solving these problems, because we have extraordinary talent. We have extraordinary expertise in the deep silos of science and other areas. But we've also built a country by bridging distances, battling the cold, caring for each other, welcoming others. When we're at our best, we have a soft facilitating power on the global stage. Which brings me to the second point. The world's innovation landscape is very rapidly changing. Yes, it's becoming more competitive and complex. The pace of change continues to accelerate. More countries are getting into the game, actively choosing innovation as their national priorities, investing in it, educating their people, focusing on building new businesses, new industries. And the funny thing about innovation, there's always a sort of a brutal binary choice. You can either watch or you can participate. You can buy or you can sell. You can import or you can export. But one thing, complacency is really dangerous. And if you're not careful, the choices that others make will actually determine your future. And through that lens, innovation is still Canada's unfinished business. We know we rely too much on our resource industries, traditional manufacturing. We know we have to build our knowledge economy, and we're not where we want to be or need to be, and most of the innovation indicators are going in the wrong way, in the wrong direction. Maybe we're not doing less, others are doing more. And there's no question that this global surge in innovation will make our challenge of keeping up harder. It will add to the environmental pressures. It will increase the risk of vulnerable populations being left further behind. But on the positive side, and I think that's our opportunity, extraordinary new capabilities and capacities are being unleashed all around the world today in all of the key levers of the innovation spectrum, and that has the potential to actually drive new outcomes. If we can figure out how to harness that, it is our collective opportunity. But let's take these levers one by one. First, people, the innovators, if you will, and the people that help them succeed. They are the foundation because innovation is powered by people, smart, committed, entrepreneurial people. Many changes here. The simultaneous rise of India, China, Brazil, and other knowledge economies is unprecedented in terms of the sheer innovation capacity, number of knowledge workers that are being unleashed onto the world stage. Of course, Canada has exceptional, highly skilled, highly talented people, but in minuscule numbers. And the ones we have are spread over a vast geography. So our 34 million can't go head to head with, the US's 300 million and the billion plus of India and China and expect a real game. It's like having one player on the field against a whole team. So we have to innovate smarter and more strategically. The second piece that's important is all innovation talent is much more mobile than ever. Hyper-connected workers can work almost everywhere and still participate in collaborative knowledge and practitioner networks that span the globe. This mobility, plus of course the internet, has leveled the playing field for a lot of aspects of innovation. Information is more freely available, markets can be accessed anywhere, customers can be found anywhere, and of course competition is everywhere. However, we can also learn from each other in a much bigger, much more interesting laboratory. We can support each other to solve common problems. We can learn from each other's mistakes, and we can mobilize resources over a much larger geography. This matters because innovation is the ultimate team sport. It happens in thriving innovation ecosystems, interconnected entrepreneurial communities that tap into local strengths and can harness those local strengths in a context that's relevant globally. We have to make sure that that local effort is connected to what's happening globally because, of course, our economies meet in those global marketplaces. But we've also learned that what happens globally can have hugely detrimental impacts environmentally, socially, economically on local communities. That's both the opportunity and the challenge of a hyper-connected world. There's just nowhere to hide. So Canada, and Toronto specifically, remains an extraordinary magnet for global talent. People bring not just their skills, but their aspirations to this great country. But we got to make sure we think very holistically about our communities as places to attract, develop, and nourish that talent, and enable that talent to participate in the fast-moving global economy from here. We need to create some stickiness, and that's an increasingly hard thing to earn. One other factor on the people front. An extraordinary force of talent will be unleashed in the coming decades as women finally enter and begin to play leadership roles in the global innovation systems. In reality, women today are contributing far below their capacity to the global innovation economy. This is true for most regions. And for those of us in the tech world, if we look at the designated mecca of tech, Silicon Valley, far below 10% of the high potential companies there are started or led by women, and they receive a fraction of the venture capital of their male peers. But women are rapidly becoming more educated everywhere. They're getting more access to money from microloans and up. They're gaining influence in business, in government organizations, in third sector influencing of places. They're leaders in social development, in social enterprise, and increasingly in social finance. And as these worlds blend, the growing participation of women will change the global innovation landscape in ways I don't think we can even begin to comprehend. But let's look at the second lever, the invention pipeline. The pipeline of ideas that's growing and becoming a much richer feedstock for progress because science, technology, and social innovation are merging, and absolutely amazing opportunities are coming to life in the interstitial spaces between formerly siloed disciplines. Healthcare is a good example, and with huge oversimplification, we see a compression between the biological sciences and clinical practice. Information technology, wireless devices, smarter sensors are helping us to better diagnose, treat, support patients in fancy hospitals and in remote villages. But it's doing much more. It's finally allowing us to also connect the formal caregiver systems with the informal caregiver systems, where actually 80% of caregiving happens, and allowing social innovation to be unleashed across that divide. Information technology is also reforming other sectors, of course, education, retail, banking, energy conservation, and even more traditional industries like manufacturing. Social technologies are engaging users and people who have been previously excluded, and social technologies are bringing customers into the invention pipeline, making that a much richer stream. The third lever is markets. Traditionally, the US and Europe have been the great early adopters of new innovations. They were also the market makers, and so smart entrepreneurs focused their energies there. Certainly for Canadian entrepreneurs, there's been a giant pull from south of the border, and we've been a little bit lazy in terms of exploring international markets. But with slowing growth and economic challenges, market pull is now coming from new places, and global entrepreneurs are increasingly looking for more flexible, agile, emerging, and even frontier market opportunities. And growth in those markets, combined with an extraordinary entrepreneurial surge, is now allowing reverse innovation and innovations from those markets to come back into the North American society. The fourth lever, of course, is capital, because just like talent and ideas, money is on the move. Large amounts of money is now in new hands, and a new breed of investors is already backing a new breed of entrepreneurs working in new emerging markets. And yes, a new breed of investors is also supporting a new breed of social innovators and change makers who are trying to work to drive impact investing as a global movement. And that's important because not only are we mobilizing more sources of private capital for public good, we're also bringing together public and private players to share not just their money, but their knowledge, and investing together in a new approach to solve some of our persistent social challenges. And in combination, social finance or impact investing, community finance solutions, crowdfunding, and other peer financing networks will hopefully get more money into entrepreneurs' hands who work in the traditional non-hotspot markets, and maybe even into the hands of women. But the final lever, of course, and the one that's relevant to the conversation today, is social innovation. And social innovation is absolutely moving into the mainstream of the innovation world, including boardrooms, governments, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and finance. And the evidence is everywhere. Innovative companies today recognize that they need a social license to operate. And that license is earned or lost in the harsh glare of customer-driven transparency. And as a result, smart companies are re-engineering their already complex global supply chains and investing heavily in the communities in which they do business. It's no longer corporate social responsibility. It's good business. The demand for public sector innovation is growing as cost-constrained governments seek efficiency, and forward-looking public sector leaders are looking for better outcomes and respond to the expectations of a new breed of citizen. The world of practitioners and policymakers are changing. Young, tech-savvy entrepreneurs are building social purpose businesses using market forces to drive social change. And social entrepreneurs are using technology to scale and diffuse their impact into larger communities. Our public policy frameworks are strained by this new world. And we need to develop new policies to be more adaptable, and those policies will increasingly be created with citizens and not for them. The formal innovation sector, nice academic research labs, as the ones we have here, where people work in white coats and subject themselves to peer review, sophisticated corporate R&D labs, important think tanks, are all somewhat baffled by the rise in popularity of hacker and maker movements. And at the same time, experts and citizen innovators are building surprisingly productive peer networks. Closed and open innovation systems are negotiating around more pragmatic strategies for intellectual property management, co-creation, and sharing value. Social innovation, as you've seen from the video, is helping us to tackle system-level innovation challenges, bringing new frameworks, user-centric design principles, prototyping tools, change lab processes to our collaborations. And we can now add that to what we've learned from the scientific method and from lean startup methodologies in the tech space. This is a really critical contribution to innovation more broadly, and it's also timely, because given the challenges we're facing, we have to, in addition to developing meso and micro-scale solutions, we have to get ahead of the potential imploding burden of damage on our environment, in global health, in youth unemployment, if we're actually going to come up with sustainable long-term solutions. Which finally brings me back to MaRS and how it fits into the context of the global innovation race and what we're trying to do here. As you can see, we have a place that has wonderful roots and a long, rich, and interesting history. And we're on the cusp of opening phase 2, which will double the size of our platform as a change agent. So the question is, now that we're through the startup phase of MaRS, how do we actually put what we've learned to work to make the biggest difference in the context of this changing landscape? And you can rightly ask, well, isn't it just another tech hub that is trying to be a Silicon Valley wannabe? Or maybe, given the life sciences focus, a bit of a Kendall Square wannabe in Boston. Or, as grand scheme projects go, Biopolis in Singapore, where the government of Singapore put $5 billion into a project to essentially create an innovation city. There's a similar one being built in Moscow right now. Or some of the more interesting ones, like the development in Mission Bay, closer to the downtown core of San Francisco, with the move of the UCSF medical campus to be surrounded by a group of business park type of tenants. All of these jurisdictions, or the East River Science Park in New York, or the big new Cornell campus that's being built there as big new accelerator platforms, because jurisdictions everywhere are trying to grapple with the fundamental challenge of how do we actually convert our innovations into economic and social prosperity. This is not a new project, and certainly with the creation of MaRS, we looked at all of these models around the world and came back to try and build something that's authentically rooted here. Karolinska in Sweden is one that we watch very closely. Not only does it have a very, very rich medical history that's quite similar to our district, but it's right in the heart of Stockholm. And so the urban innovation platform is an important set of lessons we can learn from. But what's unique about this place? Well, the first thing is it's in this really quite unique city, one of the world's important global experiments in tolerance, multiculturalism, and bad transit. It's a city that's quite unique because it has right in the heart of the city one of the world's greatest universities and a diverse system of educational institutions, from advanced colleges, specialized focused universities like OCAD, and others. So a very, very deep root system in terms of the innovation pipeline. It's got a long history of productive science. In fact, if you look at peer review publications, the University of Toronto and its affiliated teaching hospitals, which really make up our neighborhood, are second in the world behind Harvard in terms of sheer output of academic research publications. This place has a wonderful history of discovery. The old Toronto General Hospital, built 100 years ago this year, was the place where insulin was first given to a young boy, and a miracle happened that has changed and transformed lives around the world. So we come by our aspirations, honestly. There's a certain burden in that. The thing that's unique about MaRS, though, from the very beginning, is it's a creature of the community that was catalyzed by civic entrepreneurship, and as you've heard, by extraordinary leadership in John Evans and a number of other important players in the community, that when the hospital was going to be put up for sale to a condominium developer, this group of citizens said, we can't let this happen. It's right in the heart of our most important scientific district, and we need a toolbox to actually advance our innovation ecosystem. And we need something that is relevant globally and can serve as a global address for Canadian innovation. From the beginning, it was a public-private partnership that wanted to combine the mechanisms of profit with the aspirations and the commitment of public purpose. And that's been built into the way the real estate has been developed, as well as the program side has evolved. So today we have phase one open since the fall of 2005. Almost 3,000 extremely smart people from the communities of science, business, and money come to work here every day. They come from about 140 organizations. For every one public sector organization, there are 4 private sector innovation organizations represented here, and they span the entire spectrum, from fundamental scientists, small companies, mid-sized companies, large companies, change agent organizations, venture capital firms, service providers, and others. Everybody works in the innovation system, and the fundamental design principle was, if we can get the idea people together with the business people, together with the money people, and stir them up in a great old chemistry experiment, extraordinary things will happen. And our role is to nudge and cultivate and foster that process. But MaRS is a very unique organization because right from the beginning, it was designed with only one job: innovation. It's not a university, it's not a hospital, it doesn't contribute intellectual property. It is a facilitating platform that can bring all of those players in the innovation food system together and can then stimulate new innovations to begin and form, accelerate the process of innovation, and ultimately help scale and diffuse the innovation process. So if you look at those other projects that I've shown as examples, MaRS was always unique because the real estate piece was seen by the founders as an enabling platform that would bring those change agents together, but not the point. It was always about the software of the system as ultimately driving the results. And so today, when we look at where to focus our energies, we're focusing on 3 pillars. Our first pillar is on the innovators. We're placing a big bet on the innovators, the change agents, the people who care about the future, who have something to contribute to make that future better, and who are prepared to work with others to make that future happen. We have a series of entrepreneurship and education programs, and those will be expanded into youth leadership and a number of other fields, because the one thing that is a huge challenge in the innovation economy is that the pace of change is so fast, and we can only educate people in our formal systems at a particular point in time, at a particular stage in their lives, and we need to create a much more organic, flexible well of knowledge that you can come back to so that you as a citizen can be productive in the innovation economy throughout your career. Whether you're a young student graduating and you want to start a business, whether you've just been laid off from your job at age 40, or whether you want to start something as a second career later in life. So that's what we're retooling our talent capabilities for in this next phase of MaRS. It's adjacent to the formal education system and supports that, and it's both online and in-person, open, accessible to all innovators everywhere. Our second focus hasn't changed. The engine room of MaRS is still focused on building those high-growth businesses that are ultimately the job creation engines of the world, but also are the vehicles by which important ideas reach the market and reach the people that they're trying to help. We have quite a structured process now for advancing companies through this pipeline, with an open access at the front end and more high-touch advice and mentorship, as well as access to sources of capital as companies become further and more mature. We work in the 3 main sectors of the innovation and knowledge economy: information technology, health, and clean tech and physical sciences. But the one thing that's different about MaRS from all of the other technology centers is that 6 years ago, we embedded social innovation in the core of our mission, because it was clear that innovation touches all aspects of our lives. And if we want to develop sustainable solutions, if we want to actually have a society that is both prosperous and resilient, we have to actually think through the economic and social lens simultaneously. And we have the opportunity here to develop and support a new breed of businesses that think that way. And the really good news is young entrepreneurs are already there. We're just playing catch up. And of course, we have to help these companies grow globally from here. The Canadian market for most of them in the knowledge economy sector is way too small. Their first customer is unlikely to be here, and certainly their market-making customer will not be here. And traditionally, we've relied on the US market as that early adopter and the vacuum that pulled our technologies into the market. But increasingly, we're seeing phenomenal opportunities as diaspora entrepreneurs are building products for emerging markets. They're not even paying attention to the US. And if we as a country can actually harness that diversity and that energy and that set of diaspora entrepreneurial networks as an economic strategy, we'll see enormous opportunity for Canada going forward. So that's a big platform for us as we focus on scaling this next generation of businesses. We're early, but this platform is working. One of the early challenges, of course, was to build the physical infrastructure, to build the program infrastructure. But as part of getting ready for this next phase of life, we've actually looked at what has been the impact over the last 10 years. And in this particular study that was done by KPMG, they normalized our expenses, as you can see, to a point of 1 for 2008, the beginning of the economic recession. And you can see there's been modest growth in the platform of MaRS and its operating budgets. But our clients, through the period of the economic recession, you did see more companies getting created and so on. But as the oxygen has come back into the market, you see extraordinary external validation through the amount of capital raised, jobs created, and so on. And just to give you a sense of the context there, over the last 3 years, since 2010, MaRS clients that received advisory services and support from MaRS raised $750 million of third-party capital, and half of that was last year. So we're on a pretty powerful trajectory. But we also recognized that we have to do more to make our systems more receptive to innovation. And in a very simple way, we need to make sure our healthcare system actually adopts our own innovations. This is a cultural challenge for Canada. We need to make sure our energy systems are ready to actually accept the extraordinary innovations that are coming out of our entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so that is one challenge. That's a cultural challenge, actually, for Canada. We really prefer somebody else to tell us our own stuff is good. But secondly, we need to think about those systems also as growth engines for our economic strategy. And so from a MaRS perspective, we are embarking and are quite immersed now in, I would say, 3 important systems. Trying to bring innovation to health by bringing both our important innovations into our own healthcare system, getting them to patients first here, but also using our own healthcare system as a way for young companies to validate the importance and the power of their innovations so that when they go to Europe to sell or when they go to Asia to sell and they get that first question of, is Ontario buying your stuff? They can say yes. The same challenge is in the energy system where we see an extraordinary opportunity in Ontario in particular with the rollout of smart meters across the province now and the ability to actually build a true smart grid that is receptive to our energy technologies coming out of our system. Our work and learning system framework is really focused on how do we build the new economy? How is entrepreneurship going to play out, intrapreneurship going to play out, public sector entrepreneurship going to play out in changing the future of work? And how are we going to build capability for continuous learning, lifelong learning, into our workplaces? There's a social innovation component there, of course, too, is how are we going to make sure that people who face employment barriers because they have a disability or because they're a new immigrant can actually be productive in that new world of work and learning? And then we're very focused in the area of social finance and impact investing because we see that as a potentially transforming way to invest together in the future we want. All of this is part of the same innovation system. The innovators fuel the high potential businesses or enterprises, and those bring new important solutions into our systems. And of course, the challenges of the system need to be better connected to the smart innovators that are thinking about new solutions. There's one other thing about innovation and about MaRS. In the scheme of things, MaRS is a very young organization. We opened our doors in the fall of 2005. I'm not a patient person, but as my friend Tony Redpath often says, getting rich quick takes a long time. But innovation tests our courage, I think, and that's sort of one of my final thoughts and one of the things I think we all grapple with. Because it takes time for our innovation decisions and the impact of those decisions to be felt, positive or negative. These timelines are typically much, much longer than a single CEO career or a single political term, or often even a single lifetime. Stem cells were discovered just down the street 50 plus years ago. Today, we're on the cusp of that discovery beginning to really transform medical therapies. But you know what? The benefits are not going to accrue for another 50 years. So should we invest in that today when money's tight? So innovation is always challenging us because we have these urgent, immediate, burning problems that we have to fix. But it asks us and it challenges us to take the long view. Hard to do because our world is an impatient place and we have a very short attention span. But it's not just what we choose to do today and the impacts of those decisions in years and decades to come. It's also about what we choose not to do today because we lacked the courage to make a long-term decision and chose the easier short-term answers. And ultimately, that long-term view, and that's what I'm really trying to make sure we think about in the context of MaRS, it's that long-term view that must ultimately ground us and focus us from an innovation perspective. And maybe the easiest way to think about this is to go back to very traditional description of innovation. And there are many definitions, but let's take the most mainstream one we can find. Harvard Business Review says it's invention that creates value. Well, the long-term view says, value for whom? And when we take the long view, we have to ask ourselves that very fundamental question of what do we actually value in our organization, in our community, in our country? Because it is ultimately what we value that will get us beyond collaborating and just sharing our talents and our smarts and our energy. We do that pretty well. But it's what we value that will ultimately align our aspirations and our energy and help us actually build that future that we all want and the future that future generations deserve. And it's this question of what do we value that I think is the ultimate alignment factor between science, technology, and social innovation, the public and private sector, innovators everywhere, and people who care about society. It is the great opportunity, I think, for Canada. And that's the work we're embarking on, and we're working with such an extraordinary community trying to make this happen. Thank you very much. Questions? I'm happy to answer questions as long as they're not too challenging.
We have a couple of mics, I think right here, and another microphone there. Don't be shy. We know you're not a shy group. She's a little intimidating, but
Not really.
not really. Someone said that to me the other day. I did an interview, and they were shaking, and they said, because you're so intimidating. I'm a goof. I'm not intimidating. But there you go. Come on, you guys. Who's got a question for us?
Come on, Alison.
Here's one right here. Thank you. Just, if you could just state your name, please, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Peter Henderson with Ideovation. My question, I'm from the food industry, and question, I noticed food under life sciences, I believe in healthcare. Any plans around the food industry, which isn't always a fast growth, high growth industry? Of course, there can be some areas. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, and the honest answer here is that because there are many groups working in food, when we first opened MaRS, food was something we supported, but other people took the lead on. It's interesting that I would say it's coming much more into focus for us for a number of reasons. The first is a pretty simple, obvious economic reason. Apparently, the food processing industry is the largest employer in the GTA. Who knew? Secondly, and this was really the eye-opener for me, if you look at our food industry trade balance, we do with food exactly what we do with natural resources. And now that I know that, I look in my fridge and I'm horrified. Why is this soy milk coming from Michigan? I'm sure we're shipping the damn soybeans down there. So we export raw materials in food and bring the processed food back in. If you look at high-growth food businesses, just in our backyard here in the GTA, many of them are exactly those businesses I described in the other sectors. They're immigrant entrepreneurs building global food products, and they've figured out how to test market them here and take them global. So we see in our own, just looking through the economic strategy, there's a huge opportunity to rethink the food system. Of course, then there's a whole other range of more integrated approaches to how do we build more sustainable food systems, how do we deal with food security, How do we deal with the environmental impact of the food industry and all of those issues? So we don't have the answer yet of how exactly MaRS can contribute, but we're thinking about this pretty hard. And so we'd love your input on that.
Thank you.
Hi, Madison Hopper is my name. And my question is, in terms of impact investing and SRI funds, what is MaRS' role in that sort of field?
So we have been pretty active in this field as it's emerged in Canada since that was in 2007. I think we had our first social finance forum here at MaRS with a few rather confused people who were interested in the topic, but the field was very new then. With our partners at SIG, we provided the secretariat support for the Social Finance Task Force. And in that case, looking at what is happening to the impact investing space globally and what lessons can we bring from those learnings, particularly in the UK, of course, to Canada. But secondly, also beginning to work with a whole range of partners from foundations to corporate groups, community foundations, and so on, to look at initiatives in impact investing across the country. And I can tell you it was the most extraordinary experience in terms of just looking at the capacity and the number of experiments and the engagement of the community. And this was, post-2008, so there was a real reframing of how do we actually want to put our money to work to make our communities sustainable and working. So at the closing of the task force report in 2010, what we decided to do with our partners and received funding support from groups like the McConnell Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and others, was to make sure that we didn't just dissipate all that energy that went into the task force process. And so we now have here at MaRS a Center for Impact Investing that is working with a range of partners to try and help build the impact investing marketplace. In that context, we have a number of initiatives. We're doing a lot of education of people in the financial sector, people in the foundation sector that are trying to come to terms with this. We also serve as the B Corp hub for Canada and are continuing to see a huge growth in interest from so-called benefit corporations across Canada. One of our big breakthroughs was the launch of the Social Venture Exchange, which got regulated by the Ontario Securities Commission and Social Venture Connection. We're not allowed to use that word anymore by the OSC police. My apologies, OSC people. But that, for the first time, within the heart of the financial system, we now have a listing place where impact investors and investment-ready ventures can actually find each other. So it's a messy space. It's emerging. Again, there are no shortcuts. We have to make sure we have product ready for investment. We need to make sure that there are intermediaries in place to make those transactions happen, and of course, mobilize new funds from the private and public sector. So we're pretty active and always looking for collaborators.
And so can I just say that if you're interested in this space at all, we have a website called socialfinance.ca. If you sign up for that, you'll get tons of information on events and deal flow and lots of really wonderful stuff that's happening. So I encourage you to check it out, socialfinance.ca.
It's a blog, yeah?
Yeah,
Or
it's
there's a
much
blog
more than a
incorporated?
blog. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
And our social finance team also holds lots of meetups in the city and so on, so all of that information will be available on that site.
Hi, so I'm from the Strategic Foresight and Innovation program at OCAP. And there's been a lot of energy, especially among the youth, with respect to social innovation and forums like Open Idea, where different sections of society globally come up with solutions for the world's largest challenges. So is MaRS looking at creating a forum like that online, where different people can participate and possibly come up with solutions?
We have participated in some of those, and actually one of the things we're thinking about now is how to use our phase 2 space. In particular, for any of you who've paid attention, there is an amazing big glass box at street level. Subway will come directly into that space and create that as an open innovation space and potentially a kind of a global cafe for collaboration and what technology solutions might be applicable there. So we see huge potential in this collaboration. And then, of course, we participate in other formal and informal networks already. But we're excited by this movement. I think it's really powerful.
Hello, I'm your backup singer here this evening. A couple of things. First of all, after I leave here, I have another speaking engagement at Social Spark at U of T. So there is so much going on at the post-secondary institution in this space. So I encourage people who are interested to get involved. And also, we have a very cool initiative that we're about to launch. The first cohort will start in January called Studio Y. And Hamoon Akhtari is here. Hamoon, right at the back. And if you have any questions about that, Hamoon is doing some very interesting things around creating open spaces for youth, youth leadership. How do we create youth who are prepared to succeed in the new economy? So looking at things through both this economic and social lens. So lots has already happened. Great maker fairs, lots of hackathons, a lot of ungov, whatever, you name it. But I would totally follow up with Hamoon if you're interested in that space as well. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Geraldine Cahill. I work at SIG.
You're not allowed to ask a question.
It's not difficult. It's not difficult. You know, we've seen over the last several years, we've all been sort of learning as we grow around language and understanding and trying to find ways to create bridges of understanding between the public sector and the private sector and all of our entrepreneurs and so on. I guess I wondered in particular how you find in the work some of the opportunities that you have in meetings with both the federal and the provincial governments, how you feel they have come along and how much they're embracing this new sort of form of shared value and social innovation and the work that is being done here at MaRS?
You know what, there's no question that it's new. It's new. There's no recipe book for how we effectively blend these worlds. We don't have language in many cases. But you know, that's the nature of innovation in some levels, and so it's been the journey we've been on. There's no recipe book for this thing called MaRS. So, you know, we have to be prepared to embark on this journey and learn from each other and share. I think we're at a very interesting point in time where a lot of the discomfort, a lot of the translation, a lot of the us and them, a lot of the, suspicion is gone. And a real recognition that if we really want to come up with new solutions, we have to start from scratch and rethink our methodologies, our attitudes, the way we partner with each other, the way we share our intelligence and our knowledge, the way we share our resources. That doesn't mean that we have the answers on how to do that, but there's a very interesting process and I think an interesting moment in time at the moment. And as long as we come in with focusing on, that bigger picture, the longer view, this is not about a short-term cost-cutting here or there. This is about how do we actually get beyond this bifurcated world in which government solves social problems or funds all solutions to social problems and business makes money. And, they either kind of coexist at a distance from each other or hostile to each other. Governments don't have the resources to do what they need to do and the pressing challenges. And then, of course, there's a whole other layer, which is how do we actually, as a society, begin to deal with the issues that are in front of us? And where in many cases we have some tools in our toolbox, but it's actually a much bigger mobilizing of human capacity to deal with issues like climate change. And I think as we're thinking and grappling with those and come to this process, now that the groundwork is laid, now that the imperative to do things differently is clear, we are not going to change the cost curve in our healthcare system either with new drugs and gadgets or with cost cutting in our formal caregiver system. It's not going to happen, and governments recognize this everywhere. So I think that's our opportunity, and the issue is how do we move through that now to action, because you need the cohesion of vision to actually get to action. But I'm an optimist. I live in a world of innovation, which is the ultimate optimistic thing.
Well, we're glad you're optimistic, which is so important. So I loved what you had to say in regards to, the take-home message was for me in regards to the patients. How are we really being patient in an unpatient world, especially when it comes to innovation and indicating the challenges as to take us, that's the long-term view that we have to focus on. But in regards to funding, and I think that's the way to go, is bringing businesses and innovations together, because that's how we got to work. But government still has to be an important piece of that.
Absolutely.
Because in regards to sustainable, for example, with our work, government has to buy in at some point. So my question to you then is, how do we do that? So with regards to the patients, because these things take time to nurture and grow and incubate, but there's only so much time and patience that people will have. So far as is, for example, keeping kids out of the juvenile justice system and they're 6, 7, 8 years old, that long-term buy-in will take long-term to show the outcomes. So any more thoughts on that in regards to that patience and, how do we work with that in regards to, there's that whole issue of social impact bonds where they want to see the immediate results. Sometimes immediate results don't happen for another 10 years to show those incomes or those outcomes. So any more further thoughts on that, just regarding how we need to be patient and maybe investors need to think about that in a different lens?
Well, I think that is, first of all, that is the opportunity, I think, of impact investing, because you can bring foundations, you can bring community foundations that, have a long-term view because of their root systems to the table and begin that conditioning process that more private sector focused investors who also have a commitment to making a difference in their community can begin to build these tools that break these long-term impacts into measurable agreed upon milestones and then put the tools of finance to work and share the risk. And reward outcomes. And I think, although there's so much fixation on the social impact bond as kind of an instrument, it's very much a niche instrument that will only be relevant in specific areas where we have long-term data, where we can measure, at least in a 10-year period, very specific things. But it gives us a toolbox to actually take that outcomes-based approach to finance to a shared platform between public and private investors and begin to build new capability there.
And is MaRS, so in regards to some of the work that MaRS is doing, because I just think you guys have been wonderful, and we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for having come to MaRS presentation like this a number of years ago, but are you thinking, is MaRS going to be also thinking about doing more work in regards to the breaking down those silos between, the innovation, the business, and in government? Because one of the best examples we had was, one of our implementations, for example, in Pittsburgh, was that you had a philanthropist who said, did my homework, I like this, I'm really willing to put down $1 million on the table or $250,000 to start bringing this program to Pittsburgh with an understanding that we'll raise the additional funds, and then government, if the pilot is promising, we want them at the table to say, we will pick it up if the outcomes are successful or promising. So is there more thought around that? Because I think that is the missing piece for me. I think there's some great puzzle pieces that are starting to merge, and I think the synergy is fantastic, but it's that government piece where you want to say, okay, we've done our homework, we've done our due diligence, but now government step up, pick up those programs or those innovations that they think are successful.
Absolutely, and I think, I think the stage we're at right now is a classic sort of emerging market stage where exactly the bits and pieces are floating in the ecosystem, and it's about building the case studies, getting the data and the evidence in 3 places, not just one. Yes. So get beyond the pilots to the evidence that will actually give us enough proof points so we can scale. And being more comfortable with this very different model where philanthropy might be risk capital, and government might be growth capital.
Okay.
Because ultimately, in the social innovation space, often the foundations and the philanthropists are actually where they will take the flyers on an important idea or an important piece. And, part of our job as that platform is how can we try to bring all these groups together and make sure everybody who needs to be part of that market solution is knowledgeable, understands what we're talking about, uses the same language, agrees on what we need to measure, and ultimately commit to funding if we get the data.
Exactly. But it's the data, right? So which is absolutely.
But that's our Canadian opportunity. I think I'm a private sector person. My learning at MaRS has been when you can align public and private interest, you can do so much together. And I think as Canadians, we are more comfortable with the fact that government has a role in this stuff. We're not trying to slough it all off on the private sector. And so we have to make use of that as an innovation engine, not just as a policing function or, molasses in the system. The challenge for us is how do we mobilize that as an opportunity?
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
So Lena didn't introduce herself, but that's Lena Aguimeri from an organization called SNAP, which is Stop Now and Plan, which is an amazing organization that does what she says, which is keeps kids out of the criminal justice system and much, much more. They were the first client picked by the PICO Center for Social Impact, of which Ilse is a board member, and we were instrumental in developing. Now we hear from Seema from Tiffindale. You're all just my friends. I invited you.
The other piece about SNAP, years of neuroscience, 28 years of
Give or take.
neuroscience. She has the coolest pictures of what happens in a teenager's brain when they get mad. It's amazing.
She's amazing. Spend some time with Lena, for sure. Seema.
Thanks, Alison and Ilse. My company has benefited, as you know, greatly from the advisory services at MaRS, and I still continue to tap into that. My question is, I am based in Toronto. It's easy for me to access your services. What happens in the rest of Ontario and the rest of Canada?
Very good question. So the vision originally, and frankly it was an untested vision, was we need a place where people can come because they show up here for work every day, or they can come to participate in events like tonight and so on. So we have well over 100,000 people come to our events every year. But we've built our programs so that they can be accessible wherever you are. But the question was, how well is that really going to work? But we've been very intentional of capturing content, putting it online. And so, in our range of entrepreneurship programs, we have well over 30,000 people now participating in those programs, both online and in person. We have an entrepreneur's toolkit, which is a very practical set of solutions, workbooks, articles, and all of that stuff that's online. Well over 1 million people have accessed that over the last few years. And I think the province has, in their support of us developing that content, they've been very intentional to say that if I'm an entrepreneur in a rural community or in North Bay, I need to be able to access the same quality resources that would be available to an entrepreneur in downtown. So our market intelligence services, for example, is another service we provide to entrepreneurs wherever they are in Ontario. And that's growing now beyond Canada, so beyond Ontario into the rest of Canada. And we're just doing our first pilots across in a couple of other provinces. It's resources that's a challenge to get beyond that. But our goal with the content and so on has been to put it in the water supply. It has to be out there as much as we possibly can. And so I encourage all of you, if there's anything useful there, tell your friends. That's the whole point. And in fact, our Entrepreneurs Toolkit and our Startup Library and all of those content, that has huge following around the world now. So that's our goal. And we need your feedback. If there's something that's not there that you need or you think we should augment, or something that's there that's terrible, tell us so that we can make sure that resource is up to date and up to speed. The thing that's interesting, though, just coming back to the social innovation theme, when we brought social innovation into MaRS in 2007, we started to integrate it fully into our entrepreneurship programs. So last night, Alison did, Entrepreneurship 101, different types of entrepreneurship, for-profit, non-profit, all different kinds. We didn't dumb down the business content one iota, just to be clear. We just started to show different kinds of enterprises building different kinds of solutions, some using the market, some using other techniques. A few things happened. First of all, of course, the resonance with young entrepreneurs was absolutely there, because most of the young entrepreneurs we see, want to make a decent living and change the world. And frankly, most of them don't care if they're working in a for-profit or nonprofit structure. And if CRA could ever put their arms around what's going to happen to our corporate structure world, it's going to be very amusing. But the second piece is, and this is, a point that's very important to me, our Entrepreneurship 101 program went from 20% female to 50% female in 1 year. So we have to democratize this concept of the toolbox of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not having a light bulb growing out of your head and waiting for brilliance to descend before you can do something that's new. It's about, joining a team. It's about a problem-solving set of skills, tools, networks that you can use whether you work for government or work for IBM or start your own business or join a young business. So that's how we think about this program set. And as I said, that's been really learning for us, because when we started Entrepreneurship 101, what we had in mind at that time, 7, 8 years, 9 years ago, was the master's student in a lab somewhere, working on science, doesn't really know anything about business, thinks, well, this stuff I'm working on must have some application, right? That was our phenotype we designed for. Very quickly, what happened is entrepreneurs of all kinds came. The age demographic expanded. Yes, we still get thousands of students, young postdocs, grad students, and so on, but we're getting a lot of newcomers. So Entrepreneurship 101 is a place where new immigrants, many of whom have been in the country for a very short period of time, can come and figure out how does the system here work. They can meet other people. And we found people in career transition. So what's become very clear is that we need to think beyond just the concept of our thinking around an entrepreneur. And the data is pretty clear around that too. The average age at which people start businesses in the US is 39. It's actually not the obnoxious 19-year-old university dropout. It's not. So we have to make that, that skill set much more accessible, particularly to young people, because frankly, we're putting them all in a position where they have to create their own jobs. So, it's a more open concept of entrepreneurship, and we're trying to do that both in broadening the platform and making it geographically more accessible. And I would say from my perspective, that part has worked better than I thought it would.
Hi, Scott McMeekin of Jump Math. I'm just wondering, you sort of touched on it, but I've always thought that one of the challenges that people face is that you'll have a group of people who may be good at having really interesting ideas about how value could be created, but they don't actually know what to do, how to actually implement, and they can't find the people who are going to help them implement. And a lot of the people who can help them implement don't think they're entrepreneurs, and they're not necessarily drawn here. And I'm just wondering, are you working on anything for, you may be already doing this, but creating the networks that connect those people so that you get a doer and a dreamer, and you put them together to create something exciting?
And I would say that is, such a fundamental challenge in the innovation process is to marry those skill sets and make them happy to be working together and aligned. So we do this, I would say we've done a huge amount of this. In fact, many days it feels like we're in the HR business in this connecting of talent. The way we've done it through our advisory services has been to, beyond the sector experts we employ in our clean tech practice or our information technology practice or our health practice, to tap into a group of about 150 volunteers. And we select them as, serial entrepreneurs, C-level executives, people who know investment, people who understand HR issues or finance issues, so functional experts as well. And then using all of the networks of all of those people. What we've realized as part of this going forward strategy is we need to bring some structure and scale to that process for exactly the reasons that you've outlined. And so as part of this high-impact venture strategy, we actually have a very targeted talent strategy, which is how do we get the right people with the growth capabilities into those high-potential ventures, which in many cases mean they must have done business internationally. to get the scale and so on, but also bridge some of those functional gaps. And it's a big piece. I mean, innovation is powered by people. It's all about people, and that's the foundational building blocks of everything we do and the way the whole show is going to perform or not. Wrap up.
Benji.
Hi, Ilse.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You came back.
Yep. So my name is Renji. I'm from the Socialscape Global Social Innovation Mapping Project that we're actually working with MaRS, the McConnell Foundation, Ashoka, and Catalyst X. And my interest is around young people. And I just want to know what your vision is for Studio Y. Is it the program where you address the issue of youth unemployment, youth underemployment, where those are big issues, not just in Ontario, but across Canada and around the world? Is it a matter of supporting these high-impact ventures that are being created by a lot of young people and creating those enterprises to create the jobs? Is it a matter of shifting the way education is being presented around the way the world is changing? What is that vision for Studio Y? Because I know that Studio Y has a lot of potential, so I'd like to know where that fits within your vision of innovation that you presented tonight.
Well, we need to get Hamoon to answer that tough question, but I think it's unrealistic to think we can tackle all those problems with Studio Y. Studio Y in its core is a youth leadership development program. And what we're grappling with is how do we put, wind in the sails of these high potential, high impact young entrepreneurial people, whether they're public sector or private sector entrepreneurs, but make sure that the amplification happens in a larger community. So how do we tag that leadership onto the capacity of a much larger group? In addition, in our social innovation and our tech innovation programs, we're very focused on how do we make sure youth is engaged at all stages. And the good news is, there's growing recognition, not just here, but everywhere, that this is a problem that is going to have a severe impact. And so even in our Investment Accelerator Fund, which is our seed fund, we now have a specific stream looking for young entrepreneurs and giving them not just the capital they need, but how do we make sure they get a different kind of mentorship and can fill any network gaps that they might have. So I think it's a broader strategy to make sure that we mobilize everything we've got, because it's like any one of these wicked problems, we got to put our best stuff on the table. But Studio Y is very much focused at being the kind of hot core of that effort. And we're so excited about the young people that are going to be part of that. And I think hopefully we're going to learn. It's, it's new, it's all of that. So tell your friends to apply.
Absolutely, thank you.
Are we done?
I think so. So thank you. I said I have to go speak to a group called Social Spark, one of the many groups that are working, one of the many young folks that are working. And one of the things I always tell them, because they ask me, how do I get into this field and what do I do about this? And I talk to them about being a knowledge broker, about having experience in different fields, about how you need to be able to talk the language of business and government and academia and community, and how really valuable that is. And then on the weekend, I'm actually going to Vienna because I'm speaking about how we at MaRS have been able to integrate social innovation into the mainstream innovation agenda. So that Europe and a bunch of other folks around the world are looking to us. And the only reason that we've been successful in that is that we have a leader who does speak many different languages, not the Rosetta Stone languages, but all those languages that I just outlined for you. And without her, my job would have been a heck of a lot harder. Thank you all very much. Please join me in congratulating Nelson.